Ni hao, and welcome back to the M&E Show. My name is Emily.
And my name is Ethan.
Shall we take our 3 inhales and exhales?
We absolutely shall. If you're ready, let's start with an inhale. Hold at the top. And exhale. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. One more time. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. And welcome back to episode number 4 of the M&E Show.
Yes.
We're still doing it.
We still kicking.
We're still here. And we're going to keep it going. Today's episode, we're going to talk about time.
And the reason we're wanting to talk about time is we just refilmed our first episode. And
Is why I'm wearing the same outfit that you saw back in episode 1.
And after we filmed, Ethan said, timeline. Because I used the word phrase. It's one
2
word.
words put together, whatever that's called, timeline.
Mm-hmm. And we were just noodling on that phrase, that word. And why don't you start us off?
I think we like to make sense of things in a fashion that works with our minds. So considering time to be linear, like a line, makes sense. Because we're born, we're 0 years old, and then the line goes through our life, and we're in our teens and our 20s, and then we get older, and we get hopefully later, and then we die. And it makes sense that it's just a straight line, because what's more simple than a straight line?
Yeah, there's nothing easier to comprehend for a human, I feel like, than imagining point, line, point.
Yeah,
So,
birth, line is your life, death. But nobody has told us that that's actually the way that time works. And personally, I feel it works in a more cyclical fashion where things are, in a way, full circle. And you'll do something at one point in your life, and somehow that thing, in one way or another, incorporates into your life at another point. And it makes a little more sense than it did at that beginning point, because it comes back around and it meets you where you're at later in life, and it teaches you something. And I don't think that that's necessarily a linear pattern, but more circle-like.
yeah, it just reminds me of the circle of life. It's you didn't exist, you're born.
The what?
The circle of life. You don't exist, then you're born, and then I'm sure a lot of us have had this thought where once you're an elderly person, a grandma or grandpa, you're very much a baby again in a lot of ways. So it's the circle of life. You don't exist, and then the point exists where you're born, and then you meet yourself back at a point where you're literally a baby again, just in an older looking body.
Do you think you're constantly making circles? Or do you think it's one circle? Because I wonder if it's almost this constant circle that you keep creating. And it keeps going faster and faster.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I can't help but mention SpongeBob, where SpongeBob, I think to Mrs. Puff, is like, we're not talking about this or this, we're talking about this, which is just so brilliant. But SpongeBob is another subject.
I don't think we've mentioned
This is our first time mentioning
SpongeBob. Wow. Took us 4 episodes, but here we are.
He has a special place in my heart.
Not me, SpongeBob.
But yeah, to answer your question of are we constantly doing this, it just reminds me of that thought that every day is our birthday, and every day is a circle of sorts, because we don't exist, and then we wake up, and then we go back to sleep again in this cycle. Like, there are many cycles within the
Greater cycle.
greater life cycle. But going back to timeline, it's like we love to simplify things as humans, put things in boxes, label them, and
We also like to complicate things.
that's so true. And it's like something I feel like that is and has been percolating underneath the humanity experience is what this life is and how we can comprehend it. And of course, the most complicated thing we all continue to this day to have questions on, whether that be about existence, about God, about death, like we simplify it to as simple as a line, which is so funny. But where was I going with that? Yeah, I think there are many. Oh, yeah, timeline. So time itself, like time and line are two separate things that I feel like don't relate. Time is a social construct of sorts. It creates organization in society, in civilization, flow of, okay, there's 7 days a week. The work days include Monday through Friday. It very much is involved with organization. But for some reason, we've connected time to the human lifespan. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of, is there a place that we can use time that's beneficial and useful? Or like, to what extent do you think this idea of time is useful? And does it even relate to the human lifespan? Or how much do we need it? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm actually re-listening to that book that I talked about in episode 1, Power of Now. And the author, Eckhart Tolle, talks about time quite often. And that time is really made up in our minds. Because the future doesn't exist. And the past only exists in our minds. But everything is here now. And in this human experience, we do need planning in order to get to destinations how we want to go, even if it's not anything more than, okay, we need to get to this place by this day. There needs to be planning of sorts. And that's where I think time is beneficial, because we have to know, okay, how long is it going to take us to drive there? How long is it going to take us to then walk to where we need to go? And then how long is it going to take us to get up the mountain that we're going to try to get up to? And then we have to get back by this time. So it is a way to organize and make sense of a journey within a journey. Life itself, from birth to death, is one journey, but how many smaller journeys are we taking within that? And time allows us to be a little more intentional with how we're spending this experience, what we're putting our energy towards. So if I want to put my energy towards writing a book, well, I'll allot myself within a day a certain amount of time. And that allows me to put my energy and focus into something for that allotted time to hopefully gain something from that experience. How much time I put into it is totally up to me. It's how much energy and focus I want to put towards that subject. So I think that's where time can help us make sense of what it is we want to do while we're on this earth. And within a day, which is 24 hours, we know we need to sleep. And studies show that we should be sleeping around a third of the day, about 8 hours. We know we'd like to eat and hydrate. That could take up anywhere from an hour to 2. If you really like to spend time eating, if you enjoy eating, that could take up 2. So then you got about 14 hours left in a day. Most of us need to work in order to afford to live by the means that we desire. So generally that's another 6 to 8 hours a day on average. And then you got about 4 to 6 hours remaining. Where do you spend that time? How do you enjoy spending your free time? Because a lot of people work jobs that aren't necessarily what they thoroughly enjoy. So when one leaves work, where are those allotted hours spent? And I think those are the most important hours to really start to think about, is when I'm not doing what I need to be doing to afford to survive and live, where is that time and energy going? And just ask yourself, what do I like? What do I like doing? How can I spend my time wisely doing it?
It's interesting, the dance between energy and time and how those two things are interwoven. I'm wondering, what do you think about people's fear of time? And where do you think that fear comes from? And how do you think we can release fear of time?
I am not sure how much we've talked about this, but you brought this up to me months ago before we started this podcast, which is that you believe underlying everything is one's fear of death and dying. And that we only have so much time here, which we hope will be that we live into our later years, 80s, 90s, hundreds. But we don't have that as a guarantee. So often we rush to get things done in hopes that we do it before we die. But if we slow down and we really take it one breath at a time,
One bite.
one bite at a time, and just enjoy what we have here today in this moment, I believe we can do more profound work within the time that we have. Because if I knew I only had a year, I would really spend my time wisely. And even though I don't know that I have how much time I have, I should have that same mindset that I only have a year, I only have a month, I only have a day. What do I want to be doing right now in this moment? And if what I'm doing is far from what I want to be doing, I have to change that. And it's up to me. And it's on me to decide that I'm ready to live the life that I want to live while I'm here.
It's so amazing how you're right. Fear of death. It's like we rush through meals. We rush. We want to always think about what's next and what we think will be greater ahead. But almost the antidote to fear of death is being here. And oh man. Yeah. I forgot where I was gonna go. But yeah, so many things related to time, like energy, death. Should we go into our thoughts of death, or
Yeah, I think it translates well to the idea of time, because how often in our day-to-day lives do we consciously think about death comparatively to how much we think about time?
yeah.
And time relates to death because
It's
we
the
know
ultimate
that
trigger.
if we weren't going to die, if we knew we would live forever, time wouldn't matter at all. Time wouldn't even exist, because what does it matter if today's Tuesday or next week is November or December? It wouldn't matter. We're all going to be here forever. And so we think about time so often, so many times each day. What time is it? What are we doing later? But how often do we think about death and when that's going to come and what we're doing now in order to maximize the experience that we have while we're here?
I can't help but think of Hamilton, where one lyric is, he really does write like he's running out of time. And I also think about how it took 7 years, I believe it is, for Lin-Manuel Miranda to create Hamilton. And when I talk to people about our philosophies and the ways we like to go about life and how things we've said, like we like to kiss like it's the first and last time, and we like to see each other as if the first, and leave each other as if it's the first and last time. And when people hear that, they're like, oh my gosh, that's so sad. That's such a sad way of looking at it. But I think it's people's relationships to death and the associations they've formed that are unpleasant that create that sadness. But I think the way we choose to look at it is so beautiful, because the more one is confronted with the idea of death and the more peace one has with it, the more one appreciates the preciousness of life and is able to be here more than they were previous to that confrontation of death or struggle. That's why I believe struggle equals strength, and those we all suffer to some extent as humans, but those who've really experienced struggle and perhaps have been closer to death in some ways have just a grounded centeredness about them. Like, they get it. Yes, losing someone, and we can talk about that phrase, losing someone. When someone is no longer here in the physical as we knew them, it's sad, and that's okay. But in terms of death, I wonder to what extent, if we each had more freedom when it came to our unpleasant views of death, the more we would have a positive relationship with time and feel like we have all the time in the world, and we can really be here and appreciate the here, and days don't have to feel so short, and days can feel so long. You know what I mean?
I have garnered such a more positive view on death after my father died because of all the incredible things I've got to experience this last year since his death. And my relationship and my view on death has changed drastically because of the peace that it's brought me in a way I never could have imagined. So I know that when it's my time to go and I die, that peace eventually will unfold in the lives of the people that I've touched. Like so many of the lives of the people that my dad touched. And therefore, I don't need a rush, because what I do today, especially if it is my last day, is the utmost important thing that I've ever done. Because who I talk to today, if today was to be my last day, will be the last people that I have contact with. And therefore, they get to be the ones to tell everyone else, this is who Ethan was at the end of his life. And I think about the time that I spent with my dad before he died, and the conversations I had, and where he was at in the moments leading up to his death. And there's so much profoundness within those conversations, and also within where I was at the time. Because I think back to those moments and I think, Could I have done something differently? Could I have said something differently? How would that have affected the situation? But I can't go back. There's no going backwards in this life. And I can only learn from what I've done and move forward and take those lessons and implement them into my life and others' lives as best as I can and continue to learn and grow.
I feel there is fear of death because our people's associations with death will no longer be here, or our minds and our ability to express our minds will no longer be here. But death exists every day. Like, we always talk about grief and how each person, like, I have been serving in a restaurant for quite some time now, and each guest, like, that's the first and last time for the majority of people I interact with that I'll see them. And I have had such beautiful interactions with guests at the restaurant, and I feel sad after they depart. I feel grief about the death of a relationship. Death happens every day. Death of 2 minutes ago. We're in a constant state of death because anything that's left in the past of sorts is dead in a way. What do you think of that?
Well, you said when you told people that when we leave each other and we say hi to each other, we want it to feel as powerful as possible because, God forbid, it is the last time. Wow, we really went out on a high. And I don't think it's sad. I think it's beautiful, and there's so much gratitude in that state because we're not sad because it's hopefully not the last time. But if it were to be, let's be so grateful in that moment for being able to say bye to each other. Because some people never get to say bye to each other for the last time. Often that happens. So, yes, there could be sadness, but why not go to the higher state of being, which is gratitude, and be so grateful that you got to serve some amazing people. And if you never see them again, you gave them everything.
Yeah.
And just hold that gratitude, because when one starts to get more in tune with their emotional state and how they can navigate those states, there's certain states of being that are much more enjoyable to be in, including gratitude. But it's a practice. And if you're holding on to sadness or anger or hate, these lower vibrational energies, it's going to stop you and block you from feeling grateful to just be alive. We wake up each day and it's a gift. We're able-bodied. We're able to speak, to communicate, to laugh, to cry, to walk. There's infinite things to be grateful for, but it takes a practice to be in tune with that, to speak it out loud, to say thanks for it, and then the feelings come of gratitude. But we have to make sure we acknowledge it and we don't act as if it's guaranteed, because it's not.
It's not. Yes, I feel like the beauty of life is death. Everything is temporary, and I think people are or experience sadness when they hear our thoughts about this because they associate death with the not being here, but we associate death with being here and the gift that it is. Because, like you said, we never know when it's our last moment. And there's nothing like death to force one to fully be here and fully embrace the magic and the complex, gorgeous magnitude that is life.
The moment we're born, we start living, but we also start dying. And that's so beautiful because within that time frame, you think about it on a headstone, you have the date someone was born, a dash, and the date someone dies. And that little dash,
A line.
that line, that's your life. And what are you going to fill it up with? Who are you going to fill it up with?
Yeah, the time isn't even the focus, the amount of time. It's what happens in that time.
There's plenty of people who have died earlier than they may have hoped, but left a worldly impact on the world. And there's people who lived far longer than they thought they were going to, who left far less of an impact on the world. So clearly it's not about time spent here. It's about how that time is spent. And the more intentional we can be, the more thoughtful we can be, the more true and authentic to ourselves we can be, the more that time becomes extremely special and leaves a memorable impact on the world.
I think it would be so cool if, well, I have a lot of views on the ways our children are educated today, but I think one way I would like to see education improve is kids talking about death or facilitated discussions about death amongst kids. Because I feel like one of my first memories of contact with the feelings of sadness with death is, I think I was just sitting on the bed with my mom and it hit me like, you're going to die one day. And I just started crying like, oh my God, and she was like, it's okay. Like, you don't need to think about that now. And I am curious about that. And I wonder if there were more dialogues around death at an earlier age, would we have less of a negative or sad view on it, and we'd have the most healthy view, and we wouldn't be as one with our egos as we are and want to be immortal in some way and put as much emphasis on technology and indestruction.
It's interesting because I had a similar feeling when I was younger, but it was about my own death.
Mm.
And I didn't, or at least I can't remember thinking about my parents' death as much as I thought about, well, where do I go when I die? I won't be Ethan anymore. Ethan won't walk around and be able to talk and be able to run. And that scared me. That thought scared me. And I would talk to my mom about, Mom, tell me something to look forward to so I don't have to think about death right now. And she would always give me things like, oh, well, we're going on vacation to Florida in January and look forward to that. And that always helped me get out of that state of thinking about death so much because we know it's inevitable. We don't know when it's going to come necessarily. So there's really no reason to foster or let that idea sit too long because it's not helpful. We know we're going to die. Let's do what we want to do now while we're alive. Simple as that. And constantly checking in and saying, am I doing the things that I love while I'm here? No. Change it. Yes. Okay, keep going. Am I happy? Am I content? Am I joyful each day? And am I working hard towards a more positive world to live in? And I think it's pretty simple.
Yes. Yeah, I love just the idea, coming back to the circle, with each death, there's rebirth. Like, I remembered the day I ended a previous relationship was the day my brother announced that him and his wife were expecting. And I just melted. That was so beautiful. What better gift than a literal newborn about to come into this world? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling like we're coming to our eventual end of this episode. Not our death yet, hopefully. And thank you for spending your time with us, listening and watching, because you could be doing whatever you want in this life, and the choice to be here with us is so greatly appreciated. And I believe I can speak for both of us, we are so grateful for your listening ears and
And toes.
toes,
You can't forget the listening
the
toes.
listening toes. And we would love to hear your thoughts on the episode, what you've been enjoying, what you'd like to see us talk about more. And we look forward to having you back on the next episode.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Have an amazing day.
Farewell.